Te Kung Fei, or the Seal of Virtue Complete. 1. In that there was a Wang Tai who had lost both his feet, while his disciples who followed and went about with him were as numerous as those of Kang En. Kang Ke asked Kang En about him, saying, "Though Wang Tai is a cripple, the disciples who follow him about divide lo equally with you, Master. When he stands, he does not teach them. When he sits, he does not discourse to them. But they go to him empty, and come back full. Is there indeed such a thing as instruction without words? And while the body is imperfect, may the mind be complete. What sort of man is he?" Kang En replied, "This master is a sage. I have only been too late in going to him. I will make him my teacher, and how much more should those do so who are not equal to me? Why should only the state of La follow him? I will lead on all under heaven with me to do so." Kang Ke rejoined, "He is a man who has lost his feet, and yet he is known as the Venerable Wang. He must be very different from ordinary men. What is the peculiar way in which he employs his mind?" The reply was, "Death and life for great considerations, but they could work no change in him. Though heaven and earth were to be overturned and fall, they would occasion him no loss. His judgment is fixed regarding that in which there is no element of falsehood, and while other things change, he changes not. The transformations of things are to him the developments prescribed for them, and he keeps fast hold of the author of them." Kang Ke said, "What do you mean?" "When we look at things," said Kang En, "as they differ we see them to be different, as for instance the liver and the gall or K and Yua. When we look at them as they agree we see them all to be a unity. So it is with this Wang Tai. He takes no knowledge of the things for which his ears and eyes are the appropriate organs, but his mind delights itself in the harmony of all excellent qualities. He looks at the unity which belongs to things, and does not perceive where they have suffered loss. He looks on the loss of his feet as only the loss of so much earth." Kang Ke said, "He is entirely occupied with his proper self. By his knowledge he has discovered the nature of his mind, and to that he holds as what is unchangeable. But how is it that men make so much of him?" The reply was, "Men do not look into running water as a mirror, but into still water. It is only the still water that can rest them all and keep them in the contemplation of their real selves, of things which are what they are by the influence of the earth. It is only the pine and cypress which are the best instances, in winter as in summer brightly green, of those which were what they were by the influence of heaven. The most correct examples were Yao and Shan, fortunate in thus maintaining their own life correct, and so as to correct the lives of others, as a verification of the power of the original endowment. When it has been preserved, take the result of fearlessness. How the heroic spirit of a single brave soldier has been thrown into an army of 9 hosts, if a man only seeking for fame and able in this way to secure it can produce such an effect. How much more may we look for a greater result from one whose rules over heaven and earth and holds all things in his treasury, simply has his lodging in the 6 members of his body, whom his ears and eyes serve but as conveying emblematic images of things, who comprehends all his knowledge in a unity, and whose mind never dies. If such a man were to choose a day on which he would ascend far on high, men would seek to follow him there, but how should he be willing to occupy himself with other men?" To Shan the Kia was another man who had lost his feet. Along with Skon of Kang he studied under the master Po Huan Wzn. Skon said to him one day, "If I go out first, do you remain behind? And if you go out first, I will remain behind." Next day they were again sitting together on the same mat in the hall, whence Skon spoke the same words to him, adding, "Now I am about to go out. Will you stay behind or not? Moreover, when you see one of official rank like myself, You do not try to get out of his way. Do you consider yourself equal to one of official rank? Shan the Kia replied. In our master's school is there indeed such recognition required of official rank? You are one, sir, whose pleasure is in your official rank, and would therefore take precedence of other men. I have heard that when a mirror is bright, the dust does not rest on it. When dust rests on it, the mirror is not bright. When one dwells long with a man of ability and virtue, he comes to be without error. There now is our teacher whom you have chosen to make you greater than you are. And when you still talk in this way, are you not in error? Skon rejoined, a shattered object as you are, you would still strive to make yourself out as good as Yao. If I may form an estimate of your virtue, might it not be sufficient to lead you to the examination of yourself? The other said, most criminals, in describing their offences, would make it out that they ought not to have lost their feet for them. Few would describe them so as to make it appear that they should not have preserved their feet. They are only the virtuous who know that such a calamity was unavoidable, and therefore rest in it as what was appointed for them. When men stand before an archer like you with his bent bow, if they are in the middle of his field, that is the place where they should be hit, and if they be not hit, that also was appointed. There are many with their feet in Tai who laugh at me because I have lost my feet, which makes me feel vexed and angry. But when I go to our teacher, I throw off that feeling and return to a better mood. He has washed, without my knowing it, the other from me by his instructions in what is good. I have attended him now for 19 years, and have not known that I am without my feet. Now you, sir, and have for the object of our study the virtue which is internal and not an adjunct of the body, and yet you are continually directing your attention to my external body. Are you not wrong in this? Skon felt uneasy, altered his manner and looks, and said, You need not, sir, say anything more about it. 3. In there was a cripple, called Shishan the Toeless, who came on his heels to see Kang En. Kang En said to him, By your want of circumspection in the past, sir, you have incurred such a calamity. Of what use is your coming to me now? Toeless said, Through my ignorance of my proper business, and taking too little care of my body, I came to lose my feet. But now I am come to you, still possessing what is more honourable than my feet, and which therefore I am anxious to preserve entire. There is nothing which heaven does not cover, and nothing which earth does not sustain. You, master, were regarded by me as doing the part of heaven and earth. How could I know that you would receive me in such a way? Confucius rejoined, I am but a poor creature. But why? My master, do you not come inside, where I will try to tell you what I have learned? When Toeless had gone out, Confucius said, Be stimulated to effort, my disciples. This Toeless cripple is still anxious to learn to make up for the evil of his former conduct. How much more should those be so whose conduct has been unchallenged? Mr. Toeless, however, told Lao Ten of the interview, saying, Kang Ki, I apprehend, has not yet attained to be a perfect man. What is he to do with keeping a crowd of disciples round him? He is seeking to have the reputation of being an extraordinary and marvelous man, and does not know that the perfect man considers this to be as handcuffs and fetters to him. Lao Tan said, Why did you not simply lead him to see the unity of life and death, and that the admissible and inadmissible belong to one category, so freeing him from his fetters? Would this be possible? Tola said. It is the punishment inflicted on him by heaven. How can he be freed from it? 4. Duke Eaevla asked Kang En, saying, There was an ugly man in Wei, called Tai Tuo. His father-in-law, who lived with him, bought so much of him that he could not be away from him. His wife, when she saw him ugly as he was, represented to her parents saying, "I had more than 10 times rather be his concubine than the wife of any other man." He was never heard to take the lead in discussion, but always seemed to be of the same opinion with others. He had not the position of a ruler, so as to be able to save men from death. He had no revenues, so as to be able to satisfy men's craving for food. He was ugly enough, moreover, to scare the whole world. He agreed with men instead of trying to lead them to adopt his views. His knowledge did not go beyond his immediate neighborhood. And yet his father-in-law and his wife were of one mind about him in his presence, as I have said. He must have been different from other men. I called him and saw him. Certainly he was ugly enough to scare the whole world. He had not lived with me, however, for many months, when I was drawn to the man, and before he had been with me a full year, I had confidence in him. The state being without a chief minister, I was minded to commit the government to him. He responded to my proposal sorrowfully, and looked undecided as if he would fain have declined it. I was ashamed of myself as inferior to him, but finally gave the government into his hands. In a little time, however, he left me and went away. I was sorry and felt that I had sustained a loss, and as if there were no other to share the pleasures of the kingdom with me. What sort of man was he? Kung An said, "Once when I was sent on a mission to K, I saw some pigs sucking at their dead mother. After a little they looked with rapid glances. When they all left her and ran away, they felt that she did not see them, and that she was no longer like themselves. What they had loved in their mother was not her bodily figure, but what had given animation to her figure. When a man dies in battle, they do not at his interment employ the usual appendages of plumes. As to supplying shoes to one who has lost his feet, there is no reason why he should care for them. In neither case is there the proper reason for their use. The members of the royal harem do not pare their nails nor pierce their ears. When a man is newly married, he remains for a time absent from his official duties and unoccupied with them. That their bodies might be perfect was sufficient to make them thus dealt with. How much greater results should be expected from men whose mental gifts are perfect? This Tai Tuo was believed by men, though he did not speak a word, and was loved by them, though he did no special service for them. He made men appoint him to the government of their states, afraid only that he would not accept the appointment. He must have been a man whose powers were perfect, though his realization of them was not manifested in his person. Duke, I said, what is meant by saying that his powers were complete? Kung En replied, death and life, preservation and ruin, failure and success, poverty and wealth, superiority and inferiority, blame and praise, hunger and thirst, cold and heat. These are the changes of circumstances, the operation of our appointed lot. Day and night they succeed to one another before us, but there is no wisdom able to discover to what they owe their origination. They are not sufficient, therefore, to disturb the harmony of the nature, and are not allowed to enter into the treasury of intelligence, to cause this harmony and satisfaction ever to be diffused, while the feeling of pleasure is not lost from the mind, to allow no break to rise in this state day or night, so that it is always springtime in his relations with external things, in all his experiences to realize in his mind what is appropriate to each season of the year. These are the characteristics of him whose powers are perfect. And what do you mean by the realization of these powers not being manifested in the person? Pursued further the Duke, the reply was, there is nothing so level as the surface of a pool of still water. It may serve as an example of what I mean. All within its circuit is preserved in peace, and there comes to it no agitation from without. The virtuous efficacy is the perfect cultivation of the harmony of the nature, though the realization of this be not manifested in the person, things cannot separate themselves from its influence. Some days afterwards Duke Ai told this conversation to Mentz, saying, "Formerly it seemed to me the work of the sovereign to stand in court with his face to the south, to rule the kingdom, and to pay good heed to the accounts of the people concerned, lest any should come to a miserable death. This I considered to be the sum of his duty. Now that I have heard that description of the perfect man, I fear that my idea is not the real one, that, by employing myself too lightly, I may cause the ruin of my state. I and Kang Ki are not on the footing of ruler and subject, but on that of a virtuous friendship." 5. A person who had no lips, whose legs were bent so that he could only walk on his toes, and who was otherwise deformed, addressed his counsels to Duke Ling of Wei, who was so pleased with him that he looked on a perfectly formed man as having a lean and small neck in comparison with him. Another who had a large goiter like an earthenware jar addressed his counsels to Duke Huan of Keache, who was so pleased with him that he looked on a perfectly formed man as having a neck lean and small in comparison with him. So it is that when one's virtue is extraordinary, any deficiency in his bodily form may be forgotten. When men do not forget what is easily forgotten, and forget what is not easily forgotten, we have a case of real oblivion. Therefore the sagely man, as that in which his mind finds its enjoyment and looks on wisdom as but the shoots from an old stump, agreements with others are to him but so much glue. Kindnesses are but the arts of intercourse, and great skill is but as merchants' wares. The sagely man lays no plans. Of what use would wisdom be to him? He has no cutting and hacking to do. Of what use would glue be to him? He has lost nothing. Of what use would arts of intercourse be to him? He has no goods to dispose of. What need has he to play the merchant? The want of these four things are the nourishment of his heavenly nature. That nourishment is its heavenly food, since he receives this food from heaven. What need has he for anything of man's devising? He has the bodily form of man, but not the passions and desires of other men. He has the form of man, and therefore he is a man. Being without the passions and desires of men, their approvings and disapprovings are not to be found in him. How insignificant and small is the body by which he belongs to humanity! How grand and great is he in the unique perfection of his heavenly nature! Who it said to Quants, "Can a man indeed be without desires and passions?" The reply was, "He can." But on what grounds do you call him a man, who is thus without passions and desires? Quants said, "The Tao gives him his personal appearance and powers. Heaven gives him his bodily form. How should we not call him a man?" Huitz rejoined, "Since you call him a man, how can he be without passions and desires?" The reply was, "You are misunderstanding what I mean by passions and desires. What I mean when I say that he is without these is that this man does not by his likings and dislikings do any inward harm to his body. He always pursues his course without effort, and does not try to increase his store of life." Huitz rejoined, "If there were not that increasing of the amount of life, how would he get his body?" Quant said, "The Tao gives him his personal appearance and powers. Heaven gives him his bodily form. And he does not by his likings and dislikings do any internal harm to his body. But now you, sir, deal with your spirit as if it were something external to you, and subject your vital powers to toil. You sing your ditties, leaning against a tree. You go to sleep, grasping the stump of a rotten dryandra tree. Heaven selected for you the bodily form of a man. And you babble about what is strong and what is white.